Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Avery Saltzman,
And I'm David Eisner.
and together we are the co-artistic directors of the Harold Green Jewish Theater Company.
The Harold Green Jewish Theater Company is proud to present Part Two of the Shoah Songbook by Likht Ensemble. This concert will focus on the music from the Kovno and Vilna Ghettos in Lithuania, with rarely performed work composed by Jewish artists during the Holocaust.
It's our pleasure now to introduce you to the driving forces behind the Shoah Songbook. First, Jacqueline Grossman, known for her beautiful soprano voice and interpretive sensitivity. This year, she joins the Reed Banks Family Fellowship and International Residency Program with Toronto's Royal Conservatory of Music. Jacqueline is the recipient of Temple Sinai's 2020 Ben Steinberg Musical Legacy Award for a Canadian Jewish artist at the threshold of their career.
And Nate Ben-Horon, a pianist and composer with experience in both opera and Jewish folk music. Graduate and former staff member of McGill University and UC Berkeley, this year Nate will be a resident artist with Opera Columbus and Capital University. Ladies and gentlemen, Jacqueline and Nate.
Welcome, guys. How are you both? Good?
Good. How are you?
Good. Looking forward to this exciting evening. Can you share with us your journey in acquiring material for this second concert?
Yeah, it is. Well, I have to give credit that Jacqueline has done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of visiting archival sources virtually and just cold emailing people for material. So we have two kind of big sources for our music this time. We have the United States Memorial Holocaust Museum. Sometimes I forget what order those words are in. I think it's the United States Memorial Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., where we got three handwritten manuscripts by German-Lithuanian composer Edwin Geist. And we enlisted a friend to help us decipher the handwritten German. A musicologist there named Brett Werb, who's helped us a lot, also found a song by the composer Percy Hayde in German. So we use that source a lot. And we also have a couple of songs from Yad Vashem, the Israeli organization, which are just, there's one song that similarly is just a handwritten melody line with no accompaniment. And then there's another song that's just an audio recording that doesn't even have a source. So it was a matter of just finding those materials and other materials, sifting through them and making them into a program that we thought was meaningful, and writing arrangements and doing some composing and arranging to fill in the gaps.
A lot of in-depth research and work. In this particular concert, you have three Yiddish pieces. Was it rare for composers to write in Yiddish at that time?
This is a great question, and Yiddish actually would have been quite popular during this time. It's a language from West Germany, and it was most commonly spoken by Ashkenazi Jews. I'm not sure if that's still the case today. It's also not, unfortunately, as popularized today, but it's a combination of the German vernacular with Hebrew, and then there's also a bit of mixed in elements from other languages as well. And this is just because there were different dialects of Yiddish depending on where you were. So prior to the Holocaust, there was something like 11 to 13 million Yiddish speakers around the world among the 17 million Jewish people. So Yiddish was very common, and especially for European Jews. However, it's also noted that about 85% of the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust would have been these Yiddish speakers. So many folk songs or popular songs at the time were written in Yiddish because it was so common as a language. But today, it's estimated that there's probably only about 500,000 Yiddish speakers worldwide. For me, I wanted to share, it's been interesting to reconnect with the Yiddish language. I learned some Yiddish in Jewish day school when I was quite young, and I unfortunately forgot quite a bit of it. But as an opera singer, I've learned a fair amount of German, and I do still remember some of my Hebrew. So it was really interesting for this recital to revisit the language and realize that I knew how to pronounce most of the words already. I understood a lot of what I was reading. It's been quite an interesting and cool journey to go on this time with the Yiddish language.
Fascinating. I find a lot of the Yiddish songs that are sung are somehow more lyrical at times than the ones that are written in other languages. So it was fascinating to hear what our audience is going to hear tonight, the differences between the composers of Yiddish and not. Can you share with us some background information about the composers that we're highlighting tonight? We have Edwin Geist and Percy Hayde, Abraham Bruno, and Mark Vashovsky.
Sure. I'll speak about Percy Hayde and Abraham Bruno first. So Percy Hayde performed and arranged music quite regularly in the Kovno ghetto. For the orchestra, he also played the piano and the accordion at the ghetto's coffee house, which was a regular place for music. His two best-known pieces from this time were Mamale, which means the old mother, and it was known around the Kovno ghetto, as well as his second most known piece from the time, Fantasie in Gelb, or Fantasy in Yellow. He was later sent to Dachau, where he met his future wife, Sonja Pessin, and they both actually survived and emigrated to the US in 1947, where Percy Hayde relaunched his musical career with a popular English song called I Remember When. Highly recommend Googling, YouTubing. It's very accessible and out there for you to hear. Abraham Bruno was a prisoner in the Vilna ghetto in Lithuania, and he later died in the Kluga concentration camp. He is best remembered for two Yiddish songs that he wrote while in Vilna, Unter dein weiße Stern, which means Under Your White Stars, and Friling, or Spring, which we'll be sharing on this recital. Friling has poetry by a poet named Shmerke Kaczarginski, and in it, the narrator is pleading with Spring to remove grief after the death of his wife. This is one of the more known pieces that we'll perform on this recital, and something we failed to mention in your previous question about Yiddish music and acquiring music is a big piece of what we do, which is that Nate is a wonderful composer, and he creates a lot of the arrangements when we only have, only a vocal line or not a finished piece, or, we need to create a new arrangement for whatever reason. Nate does really beautiful work, and the version of Friling that we'll share today is one of Nate's beautiful arrangements. So I'm excited for you to hear it.
Thank you. I also will add to that you can go on Yad Vashem, the website, and find a recording of the poet singing Friling that was recorded for archival purposes shortly after the war. So that's a really, really interesting thing to listen to. That piece has been recorded a lot and performed a lot. And it has a tango melody, so it's often performed in a very kind of sad, slow tango. But the way the poet sings it is actually much kind of like punchier and energetic. So that's interesting to me. It's worth a listen. The other two composers on our set, we're doing Oyfn Pripetchik by Mark Vashovsky, which is not a Holocaust song per se. It's a pre-war song, but we thought it flowed nicely and was kind of a nice prelude to the rest of the program. Mark Vashovsky was a Ukrainian Jew who actually worked as a lawyer, I believe. He was kind of like a penniless lawyer his whole life. And just wrote and performed music for his friends and family until he was discovered and received some artistic support in publishing a book of Yiddish folk songs, which a lot of them became instant classics, basically, in pre-war Europe. And I mean, Jacqueline and I both knew Oyfn Pripetchik already. I'm sure most of us do. It's basically a nursery rhyme at this point. And the our program is kind of centered around this composer named Edwin Geist, who was German-Lithuanian. He had an extremely dramatic life story. We don't know a lot about his early life, but at a certain point, he moved to Lithuania because of a Nazi ban on Jewish composers working. He was half Jewish, so he moved to Lithuania where he could work. He married a Jewish pianist there. And eventually the town of Vilna was turned into a ghetto. And his wife sort of encouraged him to leave since he was only half Jewish and he could still get away, but he chose to stay. He tried to arrange a sort of official escape route for himself and his wife, which worked, and then it didn't work. They brought him back and made him kind of keep cranking out music, and then a few days later they shot him, and we don't really know why. We don't know what precipitated that. And his wife later killed herself shortly after that. And all the while he had been writing music, composing the 3 songs that we've put on this recital, as well as a lot of other stuff. And this music has survived in manuscript, handwritten form. None of it's been published yet, as far as I know, because a violinist in the ghetto broke into their sealed apartment and just snatched up the scattered papers that were on the floor. And that's why we have them. So they're digitized. Most of them are digitized on the United States Memorial Holocaust Museum website.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what we use.
It's really amazing. We one final question for you both. We've now completed 2 Shoah Songbook concerts. Nate and Jacqueline, you've worked hard in uncovering this work and rearranging it and bringing this artwork to life. We wanted to know what this means to you both personally, having just finished now your second concert.
It means a lot of things. I mean, this project started as sort of an artistic lifeline for us during the first part of the pandemic, I would say. And it continues to be something that we can really pour our hearts into. I mean, I would say that one thing about working in the opera field or emerging into the field of classical music is that you don't get to choose your projects a lot of the time. You go where the work is and you do what you have the option of doing. So to have a project that we get to have creative control of is one thing that's great on a personal level. And it's also just, it's really eye-opening to hear these stories and to get to know this music and sort of recontextualize it in the context of being a Jewish classical musician. And I'll let Jacqueline talk more about that since I know she has things to say.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. As I feel like as classical musicians, we spend a lot of our education, especially, but in general, a lot of our time singing Western, Christian, or Catholic music, which is really wonderful. But I actually didn't really understand that Jewish artists had a place within the classical music world before we started doing this project. And it's been quite a journey and an exciting one to explore what's out there. And I know that we're still really early in our own process of finding this repertoire and performing it and understanding it. And we're certainly not the first ones to do it either. But I've often been surprised by how much of an impact it's had on my day-to-day, how I create, what I want to create, what I feel like I have to say as an artist. I've never felt such deep personal and emotional ties to art that I'm working on it or creating. So it's a really important and impactful project, and something I mean, we're both so passionate about, and I think this is just the beginning of our adventure into this really important and valid piece of the classical music canon, or what should be a part of the classical music canon.
Well, David and I are so honored that you bring these wonderful concerts and you use the Harold Green Jewish Theater Company as a platform. It's a wonderful synergy for all of us, and we're very, very grateful and honored that you can bring this newfound work. Interesting to say newfound, but I guess so. Were written many, many years ago to our audiences. So we thank you both very much, and now we bring to you, our audience, Shoah Songbook Part Two, music from the Kovno and Vilna Ghettos in Lithuania. Enjoy.
October 19th, 1943. Document, Last Testament. Letter from Dr. Elks to his son and daughter in London. My beloved son and daughter, I am writing these lines, my dear children, in the vale of tears of Vilyampole Kovno Ghetto, where we have been for over 2 years. We have now heard that in a few days our fate is to be sealed, the ghetto is to be crushed and torn asunder. We are trying to steer our battered ship in furious seas, when waves of decrees and decisions threaten to drown it every day. Through my influence, I succeeded at times in easing the verdict and in scattering some of the dark clouds that hung over our heads. Never did I ask for pity. Never did I doubt our rights. In these hardest moments of our life, you, my dear ones, are always before us. Our innermost desire is to see you again, to embrace you and to tell you once again how close we are to you, and how our hearts beat as we remember you and see you before us. And is there any time, day or night, when your memory is not with us? As we stand here at the very gates of hell, with a knife poised at our necks, only your images, dear ones, sustain us. I trust your clear mind and sound judgment. Do not live for the moment. Do not stray from your chosen path and pick flowers at the wayside. They soon wilt. Lead a life full of beauty, a pure life, full of content and meaning. For all your days, walk together. Let no distance separate you. Let no serious event come between you. I am writing this in an hour when many desperate souls, widows and orphans, threadbare and hungry, are camping on my doorstep imploring us for help. My strength is ebbing. There is a desert inside me. My soul is scorched. I am naked and empty. There are no words in my mouth. But you, my most dearly beloved, will know what I wanted to say to you at this hour. And now, for a moment, I close my eyes and see you both standing before me. I embrace and kiss you both, and I say to you again that, until my last breath, I remain your loving father.
Oyfn Pripetchik brennt auf Feuerrohr, und in Stub ist Hiss, und der Rebellen kleine Kinderlech, dem Aleph Beis, und der Rebellen kleine Kinderlech, dem Aleph Beis. Setschek Und Singt und tanzt in Rede, macht fröhlich dem Leben. Es ist kein Spaß in der Brüder, als säumen sich dem Reben. Es soll so fröhlich luftig sein, werden Kinder sterben. Und so ist Tagefein, endlich hat ihr begriffen. Dort steht am Sule bei der Tier, streckt total Euer. Warf kein Blick, oh wie dacht sich schwer, der Speer schon gold zu teuer. Sie schwankt nur festlich leid geschwind, brach sich hübsche Rede. Der Schau hat sie kein Glück, es hilft ihr mit ihrem Beten. Euben scheint am Ohrenkind, freit mit Tränen die Mame. Sog mir, Mame, sog mein sind in allem zusammen. Lei, 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 lei. In allem zusammen. Heut Nacht träumt ich von dir, küsst es deine Lippen. Du warst so gut zu mir, doch warst ein Traum von Lieb und Glück, von Sehnsucht bange Stunden. Oh, kommt zurück, das Schicksal uns verbunden. Deine Augen schauen mich an, sie fragen mich. Meine Antwort ist und bleibt, ich liebe dich. Heute Nacht träumt ich von dir, ich küsse deine Lippen. Du warst so gut zu mir, doch warst es nur ein Traum. Wo schön, hab ich es der Fuß.